Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Stories to Make You Shiver, Volume 5, Story Number 1. I've been hearing so many stories about this place called the Enchanted Forest in Pasadena, or around that area. Most of my friends had been there, some saying they saw people with chains around them or headless apparitions floating around, and others said they hadn't seen anything. I also heard stories about hot spots in the forest where you would feel like you were burning. So one night, after going out to a birthday dinner with 5 of my female friends, I started telling them about the forest. We got to Joy's house, and I was trying to figure out where this place was when her brother overheard us talking about the forest and said he had been there and saw a headless lady. He gave us the directions to the place, and we soon headed off around 11 p.m. When we got to the forest, there was nobody there except 3 other people, and the place was extremely dark. The only light was coming from the moon. We were all very hesitant about going in because of all the stories we heard. So we decided to hold hands while going in, and we promised each other not to let go no matter what. So we headed into the forest, and I honestly do not know why, but I started laughing out of nowhere. I couldn't control it at all, and everybody started getting angry at me and asking why on earth I was laughing. So we continued to walk, and I was trying to control my laughter when all of a sudden I let go of Andrea's hand and stopped walking. She said she saw something dwarf-like cross the path, and we figured it was probably just an animal. But then we all got quiet and saw what looked like 2 red orbs in front of us. Joy let go of my other friend's hand and was the first to start running. We all then started running, and I tell you, I never ran that fast in my life. While we were running, there was definitely something chasing after us, because we could hear it loud and clear, and also felt it getting closer. I turned back to see how close it was getting, but when I looked, there was nothing there. But at the same time, I could hear and feel it. I turned back around, and as we were running, Joy, who was ahead of us, tripped, fell, and rolled on the ground. But she didn't trip on something. Something had tripped her, and we all saw it. It was as if someone pulled their foot out and tripped her. But the only thing was, there was nothing there. Another friend of mine helped her up, and we continued out of the forest. I then heard a terrifying woman screaming that sounded like it was coming from deep inside the forest. Only my other friend Andrea and I heard that scream. We passed the 3 other people we saw when we first arrived, and it looked like their flashlight was turning on and off, and they were just looking at it in shock. We hurried back into the car and headed back to Joy's house. We were quiet for a while, then Joy started telling us that she swears something tripped her. And we said we knew because we saw her trip, and it looked like something had tripped her. I'm not sure what on earth went on there, but I know one thing for sure. Something was definitely chasing us. The only question is, what was it? Story number 2. I was 15 when a strange event took place. I lived in a neighborhood named Turf Valley, in a part where the houses were new and right on a golf course. My dad had our house custom built in 1999. 2 years afterward, however, was my first supernatural encounter in my new house. My room was across from my parents' in the front of the house, with a bathroom connected to it with a sliding door. Around 10 p.m., I headed to bed, closing both the bathroom door and the bedroom door. For some reason, I had a weird feeling about open doors. As it was a cold night, maybe in the low 50s, I put on some cotton PJs and snuggled into bed. I'm an extremely heavy sleeper, and it takes a lot to wake me up. That night, however, I woke up from my deep sleep around 3 a.m. because I was too hot. I got up and walked over to my light switch to turn on my fan. When I went to turn it on, my finger got shocked. It hurt really bad. So I just used another finger, thinking it was no big deal. But after all 10 of my fingers got shocked, I decided to get back into bed. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed it. The sliding door to my bathroom was open. I know I had closed it. There's no way I could have missed it. I got up to close the door, but when I looked in, there was a man lying in my bathtub. His eyes were closed and he had a salt and pepper hair. I stood there just looking, not sure what to do. That's when his eyes opened and he looked up at me. I was so scared, I shut the door hard and ran back to my bed. Although I was under my covers, I knew I wasn't alone. I pulled the covers back and looked towards the door, watching it open yet again. Then a woman in a red dress appeared to me. For some reason she was angry, with cuts on her wrist and a long gash around her neck. She had blonde hair and piercing brown eyes. She stared at me as I stared at her. Then she started to scream at me. I was frightened and just snuggled up in my bed, unsure of what to do. She started walking towards me, but when she got to the edge of my bed, she disappeared. I haven't run into her since, but every once in a while, when I look up, I can see wisp of blonde hair following her as she roams. Next story. I moved with my two small children to a house back in March of 2004. From the very beginning, I had the feeling of being watched. At times, the hair on the back of my neck would stand on end and I'd get goosebumps on my skin as though I were chilled. In fact, at times it would be extremely cold in the house even though it was 100 degrees outside. One night, my baby, who was only a couple of weeks old, was very fussy. I didn't know what was wrong, as she was not wet, hungry, or hurt. It was not the kind of fussy that comes with colic either. As I sat rocking her and talking to her, trying to soothe her, a very cold wind brushed past me and seemed to stop on the other side of the rocking chair. A few seconds after the cold air blew past me, my baby daughter went fast asleep. But before she did, I saw her look up as though she were looking up at the ceiling. People say that babies don't smile because they are happy, or even know what they're smiling at. I don't believe that, especially after that day. She looked up to the ceiling and smiled. Not a ghastly smile, as they claim babies that young do. It was a real, true smile. And with that, she went to sleep and didn't wake again until around 8 the next morning. This was unusual, as she always woke up between 4 and 4:30 a.m. I don't know what she saw, but it was a comfort to her. After this, I began to notice more and more things happening that I had no explanation for. I always hang my car keys on a hook just inside the front door of our home. This has been my habit since I owned my first car. One day, I came home from work and hung my keys as usual, but I went to get them again to go pick up my son and daughter from daycare. The keys were gone. They were not on the hook. I searched the house from top to bottom and couldn't find the keys. I even dumped everything out of my purse, and that in itself was scary. I called the daycare to let them know I'd be late picking up the kids and went back to looking for the keys. I checked, rechecked, and checked again on the hook where the keys were hung, but they weren't there. I finally gave up and decided to call someone to pick up the children for me, when I looked up and there on the hook were my wayward keys. I was shocked, to say the least. I have heard what sounds like a woman humming a tune, and at times she's even singing the words. One night, as I was sitting at the computer as I am now, I again felt that extremely cold sensation on the back of my neck. I then felt someone gently tug on my hair and stroke the top of my head. Being as how I was the only person up and around the house, I was startled. Then, another time I was sleeping on the sofa when I felt something jump up on the couch beside me. It felt as though a cat or a small dog had jumped up and was walking towards, pulling the blanket as it went. The trouble with this is, I don't own a cat, or a dog for that matter. When I looked up thinking maybe one of the neighborhood cats had somehow gotten in the house, there was nothing there. There was no cat, no small dog, and definitely not one of my children. Thinking I had dreamed this or imagined it, I lay back down and tried to go back to sleep. But I kept having the sensation of something or someone closely watching me. I would look to see if my son had woken up and was watching me, waiting for me to wake up, but it wasn't him. Finally, I was too exhausted to care anymore and fell asleep and didn't wake again until morning. The days that followed that night were fairly quiet. Then one morning, I had my clock radio on the table at the end of my couch as I was listening to a radio show. The clock radio was sitting flat on the table, not near the edge, and the cord was not where it could get hooked on someone's foot and pull the clock off the table. But the clock radio jumped off the table and flew partway down the hall and landed on the floor. It landed upright the way it was on the table. When I picked the radio clock up, the station had been changed and the band had been changed. It had been on AM station, but when I picked it up, it was on an FM station. This was about 10 in the morning. Now that day, the TV went off by itself, the kitchen faucet turned off and then back on, and the TV decided to start channel surfing all on its own. A couple of times I thought I'd caught a glimpse of something or someone walking down the hall out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to see who it was, there was no one there. I've never had any experience with ghosts or anything like that, and never really gave the subject much thought. I didn't know if this was something I should worry about, or if I should just leave it alone. I didn't feel threatened, but eventually I did what I thought was the smartest thing to do. I went and moved out when my lease was up. Next story. I moved into a Victorian house around maybe the year 2000. This was with my family. I already thought there was something up with that house. It's got this eerie feeling to it, but my parents said it was my imagination, so I kind of left it at that. But so many things have happened. I saw a woman in black standing on the stairs while I was coming out of the bathroom. It was broad daylight, so I didn't think it was a trick of the light. I've heard footsteps walking down the hall in the middle of the night, and the hall has a wooden floor. I peered around the door thinking it might be my parents, and saw this figure in black ascending the stairs. I blinked, and it vanished. My parents went on holiday, so I was to stay up in the attic room while my grandmother kept my own room. I sat at the desk beside the slanting roof and felt footsteps pounding past me on the floor, but there was nobody there. I heard people running up and down the stairs. Getting agitated, I would throw the door open thinking it would be my brother or sister, to find nobody there. I stood at the foot of the stairs once, alone in the house, and saw feet running up the stairs into the darkness. I was downstairs with my brother, alone in the house, at about 4 in the afternoon. This was a few weeks afterward. And while walking past the dining room, someone, well, it looked like a figure made entirely of some sort of white energy, walked straight at me. We were so close we would have collided. I leapt out of the way and gasped, but there was nothing there. I moved out of my bedroom a few months after that, and I finally referred to my new roommate as Dennis after watching the ghost on Angel. Dennis has never been seen. At least I don't think I've seen him. He has been known to play around with the lamp on the ceiling, so it would be half hanging off, and he rips my posters off the walls. I never really believed that he existed, just a little ghost story I like to tell my friends, but I can feel his presence standing in my bedroom door. The floorboards creak, though he's not always there. A few weeks ago, in the middle of the night, I got up to go to the toilet and came back to bed. As I was lying there, I heard a voice crying, "Ah!" I looked up stupidly, but as usual, there was nothing there. Thinking it was just my imagination, I lay back down in bed when suddenly there was a crash and my door flew open to reveal nobody outside. It was as if a fist had connected with the door. I don't believe there's any harm in Dennis or the ghosts in my house, though. And I don't think all ghosts are evil. At least, I hope not. Next story. Back in 1983, I moved in with my then boyfriend and his dad and stepmother. I moved out on an island in the middle of a lake called Lake Pearl. Back in the early 1900s, I guess they used this as a camp. I heard that it burned down and later on someone rebuilt it into a 2-bedroom house. I'd heard that a woman and a young boy died out there a long time ago. Then in 1985, or a little later, a little boy drowned near the house. Their spirits must have figured that they would all like to come and live with us four. They like to play games with all of us. On one particular evening, we were hosting a square dancing party out there. Now, most of these people are in their 40s or so. There were about four people sitting on the sofa, and in front of them was a dish filled with candy. All of a sudden, the dish went flying. They couldn't believe what they saw. We could not believe the ghosts were going to act up while we had company. We had to explain that we had a non-paying tenant here also. They were in shock. Later on in the evening, we were all playing cards when my boyfriend's aunt asked him, "Why is your friend over there wearing knickers?" He stated, "That was not one of my friends." But she was adamant about it and ran up the stairs to see him. To her surprise, there was no one up there. There was also the smoke ghost, as I call them. They used to linger around at night while we watched TV. Sometimes they would throw a big breeze of cold air at us. We also heard loud footsteps on the roof, and at one point we even called the local police to come out in their boat to investigate. Of course, they found nothing. Then one night, I really freaked out when my boyfriend's dad was in his room sleeping, and all of a sudden he let out a scream, "Help! I can't get up!" Of course, we both went running in there to see what the matter was. When I switched on the light, to my surprise, there was a little bump print and palm prints on the headboard in the dust. That was scary. Around 1986, the father and stepmother bought a house across the lake, and we stayed on the island alone. On their last day of moving, the stepmother jokingly invited the ghosts to move with them. I said they won't leave here. They have been here for years. Unbeknownst to us, they would go. It took them about a month or so for them to start the games with my boyfriend's father and stepmother. On one early morning, the father was in the downstairs bathroom shaving when all of a sudden he felt a pinch on his butt. He yelled, "Hey, stop it, Kathy." Well, Kathy was upstairs in the shower at the same time. Their presence was well known now. The next trick they pulled was when the plug to the sink disappeared for about a year. Then all of a sudden, it appeared in the toilet one day. My boyfriend and I moved out and went our separate ways in 1987. Boy, do I miss that place. Next story. My mother and I moved into an old house across from the First Church Cemetery in Old Wethersfield, Connecticut. This was the state's oldest town, settled in 1634. The house was sectioned off into 5 apartments. We moved into the top apartment near the rear. We stayed in the apartment for a total of 6 days before moving back to our old house. The minute I stepped foot in the door, I felt uneasy. The landlord was very weird himself when showing us the apartment, asking me questions like, "You feel good here, don't you?" The house was built in 1692, I believe. The basement was very strange and creepy. All the original stone foundation existed, as well as a weird room with just dirt on the ground. On the second day of living there, I came home at about 5:20 a.m. As I walked by my mother's door, she stopped me and said, "Please don't be freaked out, but I have to tell you something." She told me that she was awake using the laptop at 5:05 a.m. and happened to look over onto the floor at the alarm clock. The alarm clock began flashing rapidly, and she told me a voice came out of the clock saying, "Honey, wake up, honey." Keep in mind there was no batteries, and the clock was not plugged in. The next day I was sitting up in my room on my computer at about 3 a.m. with the stereo on very low. I swore I kept seeing something in the corner of my eye near my open closet. As I continued to type, I heard a noise, a voice mumbling. I turned down my stereo and I heard the low, painful man's moaning again. It lasted about 10 minutes and then stopped. The moaning was coming directly from my open closet. I immediately left with a friend. The next night I returned home at about 11:30 to see my mom at the top of the stairs with the apartment door open and on the phone crying. She had told me she heard the same moaning coming from my closet. She also reported that it got very cold and the dog was barking at the closet. It lasted about 10 minutes on and off, she said. I calmed her down a bit and I sat down in the kitchen. It got freezing cold. The computer was going nuts flashing. We both heard a different moaning coming from the kitchen window this time. We left for the night not wanting to ever go back. The next day, we ended up moving back to the apartment because my sister convinced my mother nothing was wrong and that we were crazy. Once again, I was at the apartment for the whole next day since I was furious my mom wanted to go back. At about 10 p.m. the next night, my friend got a voicemail on his cell phone from my mom saying she left the apartment for good to go to my sister's house. When I talked to her the next day, she told me her and my niece were in the apartment alone. My niece then said to my mom, "Grandma, who's that man talking?" The moaning was coming from the closet again. My mom, being a protective grandma, decided to yell at the closet, screaming, "Leave us alone!" The moaning became more angry, and she felt a pain in her neck. They immediately left the apartment. She showed me a red mark on her neck, which then became 3 scratches. She also had 3 scratches on her chest. We left the house for good after 6 days of very strange and frightening occurrences. I believe there are people renting the apartment out today. I want to wish them the best of luck. Next story. I was at my house hanging out with my best friend. I think it might have been a Friday or a Saturday. I was having a sleepover and it was around 10 p.m., drinking soda and laughing at each other's jokes. We were the only ones at home, and we were downstairs in my room. My mother was at work. Sometimes she had to work late. My Labrador had gone upstairs to eat out of his food bowl. Then he came back downstairs to me. We were both stroking the dog because he's so soft, and then all of a sudden it got very cold in my bedroom. We checked all the windows, and they were closed. My friend made a random joke. "Maybe there's a ghost in here." We both started laughing. It was still very cold in the room when all of a sudden my TV in the living room upstairs turned on. We both heard it too. I was thinking, okay, my mom's home already? Checking the TV, it appeared no one was up there, and the remote wasn't right where I had left it. I had left it on the couch, and now it was on the table, and my mother's car wasn't in the driveway. After exiting the room, the TV turned on again. 15 minutes later, Brianna volunteered to check for wire problems, even though neither of us knew how to fix electrical things. I turned it off, and sure enough, it came on as soon as I hit the off button. My friend jumped, and it got cold, but only upstairs where we were at the time. We laughed it off and ignored it until my dog started whimpering but also growling at the same time toward the curtain near where I took him out to use the bathroom. This we were really weirded out by. I yelled at my dog to shut up, and he did when we dashed back downstairs to my room. I made my dog sleep downstairs with us. After my friend left, went back home on Sunday, I started seeing weird things in my room, and I got a few shivers now and then, and they continued to happen, but I bravely ignored them. However, a month later, this really confused me. I got the impression that this was a suicidal ghost, wanting to hurt me or something, and is that possible? Now, I was about to turn 15 that summer, and my mom considered me a responsible person. Usually, when I would be home alone, I would either be in my room or on the computer talking to my friends online. Of course, I'm paying attention to the computer or something else besides my hand unless I'm drawing. I would be occupied by something else, and when I would leave my room or the computer room, I would look down to see red scratches and cuts on both my hands. And it really stung too. It kept happening, then it stopped. Something was making someone angry. This unseen force kept scratching my hands with something sharp. When I turned 16, the following year it happened again in the late summer months. It worried me. After all that time, I asked my best friend about it, and she said she thought it might be a poltergeist. I always keep my nails away from my hands. I do keep my nails short, but they're not sharp at all. The images I kept seeing in my room, I just didn't understand them. Now, as a matter of fact, I always sleep with my back against the wall. It just makes me nervous to think of going to sleep with my back exposed. What I see in my room when I open my eyes after they adjust is this older looking woman, about her late 20s. Her hair is long, waist length, and black. Covers her face, and she wears a white dress. and she has a weird looking knife like she's going to hurt me. Later that year, I had a dream of the same exact lady with that weapon, and I still don't understand what it means. The dream was unimaginably creepy. Then, the following year, which was a Saturday night, I was home alone with my dog. I was trying to fall asleep, and it was about a little after midnight. For some reason, I only slept for about 10 minutes when I woke up. I felt this very warm pain on my right upper leg as if someone had cut me, and then I felt some gripping pain grabbing my arm. My leg was fine, but it kind of ached also. Every time I moved, it got bad, like someone was trying to pull me out of my bed while I was half awake. After that, we moved out. And in a way, I never got an answer to who or what it was. But I guess I'll just stay ignorant. It's preferable that way. Next story. I worked for years in a small office near the older part of town. The office was built in the 60s. I would on occasion hear someone call my name when I knew I was the only one there. Or I'd get that feeling that I get when there's a visitor. One afternoon, myself and a coworker were standing in the hall talking about the weird feelings that she'd been having in the office, and then I confessed to my experiences. I can only assume that our discussion about whoever was around made them decide to show themselves. I looked up and all I could see was a face rushing towards me. The image is still burned in my memory. I jumped out of the way and landed on the floor, and my friend was up against the wall. We decided before we would explain to each other what we thought we saw, we would first write it down. Our descriptions matched. He was a tall, thin man in a suit from around the turn of the century with dark hair and a handlebar mustache. The next day we went to the office on a Saturday and took pictures as we felt something. One picture was a distinct cloud over my head, and a shot taken down in the law library found a young girl standing at the end of the wall dressed in a white and blue school uniform from around the same period as the man. We did some digging into the past of the property, and apparently there was an old boarding house out there that burned down around the early 1900s, and the jail was on that property too for a short time in the 1880s. I've moved twice since then, and the pictures have disappeared, but the image of that man that day I don't think will ever disappear from my mind. Also, during our investigation, we found that people in the state attorney's office, behind the law office, and sitting on the same property had also seen the man with the mustache and the little girl on numerous occasions, even the state attorney himself. Next story. The incident took place in Austin, Texas on August 14, 1995, between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. A friend of mine, who I shall call James, had been going through some bad times as of late. He had been suffering from partial paralysis from an injury he had sustained years ago in a diving accident. His business was failing, his bank account was dwindling, and since he had lost his lease with the apartment he lived in, he had to live with a friend until he could get back on his feet. As sometimes happened in all of us, James lost hope and felt that there was no way out, and so he committed suicide. I was told about this the next day by a mutual friend of ours. A bunch of us got together later to remember him and grieve. 2 nights later, while at a payphone at the corner of South Lamar and Barton Skyway, which is a well-lit street on the corner, I was talking to a lady friend when I caught a glimpse of something moving out of the corner of my eye, out of my right eye. I looked to my right across the street and saw James. He was walking without any sign of paralysis at all. He looked completely solid. As he walked, he looked at me and smiled, nodded, and then disappeared. Oddly enough, I wasn't frightened by the experience, but I sure was surprised. I went and told another mutual friend of ours of my encounter, and he told me they'd heard that James' sister-in-law had also seen him. According to a report, she was making some sandwiches in the kitchen of the house she shared with her husband, Drew, who was James' brother, when she felt a chill followed by a feeling that she was being watched. When she turned around, James was standing in the doorway of the kitchen a few feet away from her. He spoke to her saying, "I'm okay. Everything's all right. Where's Drew?" She screamed and he disappeared. She and I are the only ones who saw him. 2 days later, James was taken to Dallas and laid to rest there. As far as I know, his ghost has not been seen since.